You ever look at your workout routine or maybe one you're setting up for someone else and just wonder, is this really hitting the mark?
Yeah,
Especially for female athletes, it sometimes feels like the general advice, it's missing something important.
definitely. It's like there are these gaps.
Exactly. So that's what we're diving into today.
hmm We looked at this really useful piece from the IYCA blogs. It's called Top 3 Ways Females Differ from Male Athletes.
Okay.
And it's a great starting point, kind of a shortcut, to understanding some key things that, well, often get glossed over in those broader fitness talks. Gives you a much better picture.
Right. So our mission here is basically to pull out the practical stuff, maybe find some surprising details about training female athletes effectively and safely too.
And it's not just for elite competitors, right?
No, exactly. This is for anyone interested in athletic performance, injury prevention, just understanding how the female body adapts to training, getting beyond the generalities. Okay, so let's unpack that first big difference the IYCA highlights: injury risks.
Yeah, this one's pretty stark when you see the numbers.
Yeah.
The article points out, and other research backs this up, that female athletes have a significantly higher risk for certain injuries.
Like what specifically?
ACL tears are the big one they mention. Really stands out. Some research, I think it was the British Journal of Sports Medicine cited, suggested female athletes are anywhere from 2 to 8 times more likely to tear their ACL than male athletes doing similar activities.
Wow, 2 to 8 times. That's a huge range. What's driving that? It can't just be bad luck.
No, not at all. The IYCA blog breaks it down into like 3 main areas. First, anatomy.
Okay.
They talk about the Q angle, that angle from your hip down to your kneecap. It tends to be wider in women, generally speaking.
And that puts more stress on the knee.
It can, yeah. Especially during certain movements like landing or cutting. Then you've got hormonal factors.
Wow.
Hormone fluctuations throughout the menstrual cycle can actually affect joint laxity. So maybe more flexibility, but potentially less stability in the joints at certain times.
Interesting. Okay, so anatomy, hormones. What's the third?
Biomechanics. Basically how the body moves. Differences in running patterns, jumping mechanics, landing strategies, that sort of thing.
Right. So it's this combination of like our physical structure, our hormones, and how we actually move. Knowing all that, what can we actually do about it? What are the practical steps for prevention?
That's the key, isn't it? And the article gives some really solid strategies. First up is neuromuscular training.
Okay, what does that involve?
It's less about just building big muscles and more about improving the communication between the brain and the muscles. Better control, better stability.
Ah, so smarter muscles, not just stronger ones.
Exactly. Especially focusing on the muscles that support the knee. So hamstrings, glutes, the core. It's like training the body's reflexes to stabilize things properly.
Makes sense, building that stable base. What else?
Proper technique, especially for jumping and landing. This is huge in sports with plyometrics,
Yeah.
explosive stuff.
Yeah.
Teaching athletes how to land softly, how to absorb force correctly to take the stress off the knee joint itself, super important.
Okay, technique matters. Anything else?
And then there's managing training load. This applies to everyone, obviously, but it's crucial here. You need to periodize training plan cycles of work and rest to allow for adequate recovery.
Right, pushing too hard without rest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That just ramps up the risk for overuse injuries, not just ACL tears.
So smart planning, technique, specific neuromuscular work. The IYCA also mentioned something about getting the right expertise involved.
Yeah, they strongly suggest that ideally, S&C programs should really be handled by certified specialists, people who understand these nuances,
Right.
who have experience specifically with female athletes.
Right.
And if that's just not possible, then coaches themselves really need to, commit to learning this stuff. Self-education is key.
Absolutely. That's a big takeaway. Okay, let's shift gears. The second key difference: hormonal fluctuations. This is obviously unique to female physiology. How does the cycle impact training?
Well, it's fascinating because there's a direct link. The IYCA blog explains how those monthly hormonal shifts can really influence things like energy levels, muscle recovery speed, even how tired an athlete feels during a workout.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So roughly the first half of the cycle, the follicular phase, is often linked with potentially better strength gains and quicker recovery.
Okay.
Whereas the second half, the luteal phase, might come with feeling more fatigued or like the same workout feels harder. And there's research supporting this, like a study by Sung and colleagues they might be referencing, showing these kinds of performance shifts.
So our bodies are kind of operating on different settings throughout the month. How can athletes or coaches use that knowledge practically?
This leads to the idea of cycle-aware training. It's about, well, first, tracking the cycle, then maybe adjusting the training focus based on the phase.
How so?
The suggestion is you could potentially schedule more high-intensity stuff during that follicular phase, when energy and recovery might be better.
Right.
And then maybe shift the focus during the luteal phase towards, say, recovery, working on technique, or lower impact activities, depending on how the individual feels.
That sounds really intuitive. Tuning into the body's rhythm. Are there other practical things to keep in mind with these hormonal shifts?
Oh, definitely. Nutrition and recovery become even more vital. The article stresses supporting athletes, maybe paying attention to iron intake, especially if energy dips are common in the luteal phase, and making sure hydration is on point.
Good points.
And maybe just as important is fostering an environment where it's okay to talk about this stuff. Normalizing conversations about periods in sports settings. It shouldn't be taboo. It's a basic physiological reality that affects training.
Yeah, breaking down those barriers, that openness seems critical. Okay, third area. Psychological considerations. This feels like something easily missed.
It really can be. And the IYCA article brings up some unique psychological hurdles female athletes might encounter. A lot of it stems from, well, societal pressures about body image. And specifically, that old persistent myth that strength training will automatically make women bulky.
Ugh, that myth. It's amazing it still hangs around. How does that actually impact things?
Well, it can seriously put female athletes off even starting strength and conditioning. Or if they do participate, that worry, that self-consciousness about how they look instead of how they perform, it can really sabotage their confidence and focus.
Yeah, I can see that. It shifts the focus completely. So what can coaches or teammates or anyone in that support circle do to counter this, to create a more positive space?
The IYCA has some good practical ideas. Language is huge.
How so?
Focusing the conversation on strength, on what the athlete can do, their improved capability, hitting performance goals, not on appearance, making that the measure of success.
Celebrate what the body can achieve, not just how it looks.
Exactly. And another big one is showcasing positive role models, highlighting successful female athletes who clearly benefit from strength training. Seeing that helps shatter those bulky myths. Representation really matters here.
Absolutely. See it to be it kind of thing. What else helps build that positive mindset?
Education is key too. Helping athletes understand why they're doing certain exercises, teaching proper technique that builds confidence and a sense of control,
Right.
and then just consistently acknowledging progress, celebrating the wins, big or small. It reinforces their effort and builds that self-belief. The IYCA even points people to their own resources, like IYCA.org, for coaches looking to learn more.
Okay, so pulling this all together, it's crystal clear that a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't cut it for strength and conditioning.
Not if you want optimal results, no.
Especially for female athletes. You've got to factor in the unique injury risks based on physiology, understand and maybe even adapt to hormonal cycles, and be really aware of those psychological pressures.
A tailored approach is definitely the way to go. It leads to better, safer outcomes, and it's ultimately more empowering for the athletes.
Yeah, it really feels like taking these differences into account helps move past generic advice and builds an environment where female athletes can just thrive physically and mentally.
Well said. That's the goal.
This has been super insightful. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How understanding these kinds of individual differences, physiological, psychological, applies not just in elite sports, but maybe in our own general fitness too.
Definitely.
Like, how could paying attention to these nuances help you listening right now, whatever your fitness goals are? Something to mull over.